You find yourself walking slower now. Not because you're tired, though let's be honest, your legs are starting to file complaints, but because the mood is shifting. Something about this part of the step feels heavier. Not in a "you're about to get eaten by wolves" kind of way. More like you've wandered into a place where things still live, even if you can't see them. Ahead, a cluster of deer stones emerges from a shallow rise. They're different from the others, not just in age or wear, but in what surrounds them. There are small circles of stones on the ground. Bits of animal bone. Charred wood. This wasn't just a burial site. This was a ritual space. A place where people didn't just mourn the dead, they spoke to spirits. This is where things get shamanic. Mongolian shamanism is one of the oldest spiritual traditions still practiced today. Rooted in animism, it holds that everything, trees, rivers, animals, even stones, has a spirit. And among all those spirits, the sky is especially important. It's the realm of the upper world, the domain of the ancestors, and the ultimate destination of the soul. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. You imagine a scene, a shaman dressed in layers of fur and feathers, a drum slung over one shoulder. They chant, rhythmically, the drum beating like a second heartbeat. Around them, villagers sit in silence, eyes half closed. Above, the deer stones cast long shadows across the grass. You don't know what the shaman is saying, but the air itself seems to respond, pulling tighter, humming faintly that drum. It wasn't just for show. In many Mongolian traditions, the drum is considered a vehicle, the spiritual horse. When the shaman plays it, they're not just making noise. They're riding the rhythm into trance, crossing into the spirit world. Some even describe it as a kind of flight, leaping from world to world, like those deer etched into the stones. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night: some modern shamans believe certain stones hold memory. Not metaphorically. Literally. As in, the stone remembers who carved it, who touched it, what was whispered to it. Which is kind of beautiful, and also mildly terrifying when you realize you've been patting every deer stone like a curious tourist. Now, scholars don't all agree on whether the deer stones were used in shamanic rituals. Some say yes, absolutely, look at the symbols. The deer, the flight, the orientation. Others insist that's speculative at best, and that there's no concrete evidence linking the stones to any trance state ceremonies. But here's the thing, shamanism isn't exactly a lab science. It's experimental, passed down through stories, symbols, and sensations. You're not going to find peer-reviewed journal entries from 1000 BCE titled Trance-Induced Sky Contact, a double-blind study. What you do find, though, are connections. You notice that many of the deer stones are located at places with exceptional views of the sky. Not just wide-open areas, but places where the horizon is flat, uninterrupted. Perfect for watching celestial events. Eclipses. Solstice sunsets. Meteor showers. If you were trying to cross into the spirit world, wouldn't you want a good launch pad? You kneel beside one of the smaller stones, tracing a deer with spiraling antlers. It's stylized, not like a biological animal, but a dream version of one. The body curves in impossible arcs. The legs seem to move and not move at the same time. It doesn't look like it's running on the stone. It looks like it's running through it. Some ethnographers have proposed that the deer is a stand-in for the shaman themselves, an image of transformation. In trance, the shaman becomes the deer. Or maybe the deer becomes the shaman. Or maybe it's both, and time doesn't work quite right in spirit land. And if that feels a little hard to swallow, here's something more grounded. Across Eurasia, the deer has long been a symbol of liminality. A creature that moves between worlds, between forests and fields, life and death, earth and sky. In Siberian mythologies, the cosmic deer carries the sun on its antlers. That's right. The entire sun. Some scholars believe that the ritual carvings, like the belts and weapons, were meant to prepare the spirit for that journey. The stone, in essence, became the vessel. A launch sequence in symbols: belt for passage, dagger for protection, deer for movement, sun for destination. It's not just a memorial. It's a travel brochure for the afterlife. You sit with that for a while. The idea that these weren't just funerary markers, but spiritual collaborators. Tools for guiding the soul. Touchpoints between worlds. A breeze passes, gentler now. Almost warm. You close your eyes and listen. You imagine the drum again, steady and slow. You imagine a figure moving through the mist, face hidden, hands raised, speaking to something above the stones. And for just a second, the sky feels thinner. Like you could push through it if you really wanted to. Of course, you don't. You're not that brave. Or foolish. Or well-dressed for interdimensional travel, but still, you keep one eye on the horizon. Just in case. You leave the sacred circle behind, but not without glancing over your shoulder, twice. The deer stones stay where they are, but part of you half expects one to wink. Or at least shuffle slightly. You pick up your pace. The land begins to change as you head northward. The grass is thin. The soil hardens. There's a colder bite to the air, and the wind picks up that old familiar habit of slapping your ears without permission. Ahead, the landscape becomes more rugged. Hills roll higher, dotted with low pines and the occasional startled marmot making a run for it like it owes someone money. You're crossing into southern Siberia now, a vast and sometimes grumpy region that has a few things in common with Mongolia: boundless sky, bone-cold winters, and, you guessed it, more deer stones. Yep, they're here too. Almost identical in form. Same upright slabs, same leaping deer, same mysterious belts and sun discs. It's like someone took the Mongolian playbook and exported it, minus the horse milk. This is where the plot thickens. You're standing at what could be the edge of a vast cultural continuum, an ancient network stretching across Mongolia, Siberia, and even parts of Kazakhstan. Deer stones dot this region like breadcrumbs. Some researchers believe they may have been created by related groups, or at least by cultures in regular contact, swapping stone carving tips along with gossip and metalwork techniques. And yes, historians still argue whether the stones originated in Mongolia and spread north, or the other way around. The timeline's fuzzy, the evidence fragmentary, and the scholars passionate. One paper insists they radiated out from central Mongolia like spiritual Wi-Fi. Another claims the earliest examples are actually in the Ceylon Mountains, just across the border. And, of course, there's always someone yelling in the academic background about aliens again, but regardless of origin, there's no denying that the iconography is shared. The deer leap the same way. The belts encircle the same spot. Even the stylistic flourishes, the flame-like antlers, the floating sun symbols, carry across hundreds of kilometers. You're not looking at isolated artifacts. You're looking at a shared mythos. One especially fascinating site in Siberia contains deer stones and burial mounds, much like those you saw back in Mongolia. But here, the stones are often carved on all four sides, something relatively rare in their southern cousins. Some even feature human faces, etched in simple lines: brows, eyes, a straight nose. It's eerie. Personal. Like someone trying to leave behind a self-portrait for a god. You pause in front of one such stone. The face is faint but there. Its expression? Neutral, unreadable, maybe a bit disapproving, kind of like your high school math teacher. Below the face, the familiar belt. Below that, weapons. And as always, the deer rising along the edge. The whole stone feels like a story you're just barely failing to understand. Like reading poetry in a language you sort of remember from childhood. You wonder, were the people who carved these stones telling the same story in different dialects? Or was each culture remixing a central myth in its own way, like ancient fan fiction? Here's your quirky tidbit for this snowy leg of the journey. In the Altai region, local folklore includes a creature known as the sky deer, a spirit animal that visits people in dreams, said to carry messages from ancestors. These stories persist today, sometimes woven into local music or ceremonial dances. So while academia is still debating stone dates and carving styles, actual humans out here are still dreaming of deer. That kind of continuity makes you pause. The deeper you go into Siberia, the colder the stones become, not just physically, but symbolically. Some lack the warmth of the sun discs. Their deer are stiffer, more rigid. Their carvings, though just as precise, feel reserved. It could be cultural variation. It could be environmental erosion. Or it could be your imagination, playing tricks on you again. Still, the consistency is too strong to ignore. These weren't casual neighbors. They were part of a cultural flow, maybe not unified politically, but spiritually and artistically connected in ways we still don't fully grasp. And now for something spicy, a few researchers have even proposed that the deer stone tradition might have influenced, or been influenced by, artistic traditions as far west as the Scythians. You know, those horse-loving, gold-wearing, sometimes head-hunting nomads that the Greeks couldn't stop writing about. Scythian gold artifacts feature remarkably similar motifs: curling antlers, fluid motion, hybrid beasts. Some even look like they leapt straight off a deer stone and into a jewelry box. Historians still argue whether this is direct influence, parallel evolution, or one big cosmic coincidence. But either way, you're starting to see that these deer stones weren't just a local curiosity. They were part of something bigger. A conversation whispered across mountains and valleys, carried on horseback, through fire rituals and night skies. You're not just wandering through Mongolia or Siberia anymore. You're tracing the outline of a pan-Eurasian myth, one that spans centuries, cultures, and an unknowable number of leaping deer. By now, the air has turned colder. Your breath curls in front of your face, and the wind tastes sharper. You pull your coat tighter and keep walking. There's another stone up ahead, taller than the rest, standing alone near a frozen stream. You wonder, what did the person who raised that one believe? What did they hope it would do? Guide a soul? Mark a place? Protect something invisible? Maybe it's still doing all three. You reach the tall stone by the stream just as the clouds begin to gather. A soft grey spreads over the sky, dimming the colors around you. The deer stone doesn't seem to mind. It stands firm, half buried in frostbitten earth, antlers curling delicately around the edge like tendrils of smoke. There's something different about this one. You run your fingers along its surface. The carvings are finer, almost precise, like someone took their time. The deer still leaps, yes, but with elegance. There's a symmetry to the layout, belt in the middle, disc above, blade below. You half expect it to start glowing. You're not the first to stand here. A few meters away, you spot faint tracks in the soil, likely from researchers, or maybe a local herder paying quiet respects. There's a thin offering tucked near the base, bits of cloth, a smooth stone, a few coins. People still leave gifts, even now. The habit outlives the belief, and that brings you to an idea that's been simmering for a while: continuity. For thousands of years, people have been leaving marks on this land, not just stones and bones, but gestures, traditions, instincts. Some of those instincts are still here. They've just gone underground, like river ice waiting for spring. In fact, some modern Mongolians, particularly among the Darkhad and Tuvan peoples, still speak of stones with spirit. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. But as a matter of everyday understanding. They might not call them deer stones. They might not even know where the ancient ones are. But the belief remains: certain stones see. Certain stones remember. You remember that modern shaman's tale from earlier, the one about the sky deer. Well, there's more. In some versions, the deer is not just a messenger, it's a guardian of the stars. When someone dies, the deer decides whether their soul is allowed to cross the celestial bridge. If the soul is unworthy, it wanders. If it is pure, the deer leaps and takes them with it. You glance back at the carvings. The deer here is leaping up, antlers trailing behind like wind lines. You can almost see the motion, and yes, historians still argue whether the deer as soul carrier theory is a later cultural layer or a fundamental part of the original belief system. Some say the ancient creators saw the deer as sacred from the beginning. Others insist it was a more recent myth, retroactively projected onto older art. Honestly? It's hard to argue with a 3,000-year-old stone. It's not giving interviews, but the real question isn't what it meant then. It's what it means now. Why do people still return to these places? Why do locals still refuse to move certain stones, still whisper before stepping past them, still leave offerings at their base? The answer might not be historical. It might be emotional. These stones feel like memory. Not yours. Not mine. Something older. Something collective. Like they've absorbed all the grief, wonder, fear, and reverence of 1,000 generations, and they're just quietly holding it for us, in case we forget. Here's your quirky tidbit for the hour. In 2006, a deer stone near the Kovskol province in northern Mongolia was accidentally knocked over by construction equipment. Locals gathered, not in anger, but in mourning. The elder in the area reportedly wept and asked the workers to make an offering. Not out of superstition, but out of respect. It wasn't just a rock. It was someone's great-grandfather, someone's skybound ancestor, and that brings us to a bigger idea. Maybe the deer stones aren't just art, or tombstones, or star maps. Maybe they're relational technology. A way to hold connection between worlds. Between people and place. Between the living and the dead. Between now and then. The wind picks up again, sharp and serious. You pull your scarf tighter and keep walking. The ground here is uneven, but you spot more stones in the distance, fewer now, more spread out. They seem to thin as you move westward, like the memory is fading, and then, without warning, one of the stones tilts. Not much, barely a lean. But enough to make you pause. You walk closer. The ground around its base is cracked. Erosion, most likely. Frost heave. Time, doing what time does. But it's startling to see one of these titans faltering. Like watching a glacier sweat. You resist the urge to push it back upright. That's not your role. Besides, what if it doesn't want help? You sit nearby and let the silence wash over you. The light has faded now. The clouds are low and silver. You can almost hear the grass breathing, and you realize you're no longer just walking through a field of stones. You're walking through a network of memory. Invisible lines connect these markers. Across miles. Across centuries. They whisper to one another in a language of symbols and stillness. You're just lucky enough to be listening. In.so, you close your eyes and let the cold settle on your skin. For a long moment, you don't think. You just feel the weight of the stone behind you, the pulse of the earth beneath, the vast unknowable sky overhead. Maybe the deer is still leaping. You just haven't seen the landing yet. You wake before sunrise. Again. The sky is heavy with cloud cover, but a sliver of light on the horizon promises that the sun still remembers its job. You stretch, spine popping like a row of ancient knuckle bones, and take one last glance at the deer stone behind you. It's still there. Leaning slightly. Still watching you. Turn west now. The stones are growing rarer, fewer, and farther between. But that makes each one feel more important, more deliberate, like punctuation marks in a sentence you haven't finished reading. You keep walking. Eventually, you find one that stops you in your tracks. It's smaller than most. Just under 2 meters, tucked between two stunted pines, half hidden by underbrush. No one cleared a viewing path. There's no plaque, no tourist sign. But the carvings are vivid, untouched by wind. You run your fingers across the surface. The deer here aren't leaping. They're standing. Still. Alert. That's different. This might not sound like much, but in deerstone scholarship, which, yes, is absolutely a real thing, that change in posture is huge. Most deer are depicted mid-leap, galloping across the stone in arcs of grace and momentum. But here? They're frozen. Looking outward. Waiting. Historians still debate whether these standing deer represent a different phase of belief, a regional style, or a completely separate symbolic system. Some suggest they're watchers, guardians of the physical realm, while the leaping deer guide souls skyward. Others think they represent a time of pause, a ritual delay, or a period when the dead aren't quite ready to move on. You lean closer. The eyes of the deer are sharp triangles. Simple, yes, but direct. You feel seen. Not in a creepy way. Just in that ancient, slightly unsettling way where you're reminded that maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one doing the observing. And now for your quirky insight. In some local traditions, it's said that when deer stop moving in art, it's because they're listening. Listening for messages from the wind, or the stars, or the ancestors. Which means this stone. It might be in the middle of a cosmic conversation, and you've just walked into it without knocking. You sit beside it for a while. The ground is soft with lichen and moss. The sky begins to brighten, clouds pulling apart like old curtains. And in that soft, colorless light, you start to notice something else. The positioning of this stone. It lines up with the others behind you. Not quite in a row, but in an arc. Like a crescent. Or a bow. You trace it in your mind. There was the leaning stone, the tall one with the perfect carvings, the face stone near the stream, and now this. For points. Not random. Definitely not accidental. You start to suspect you've been walking through a pattern without realizing it. There's a growing theory among researchers, still speculative, but gaining traction, that certain clusters of deer stones form deliberate layouts. Arcs, lines, sometimes even circles. Not necessarily perfect geometric shapes, but ritual alignments, maybe echoing constellations, maybe marking celestial events. Sound familiar? That's right. We've circled back to the idea of sky maps. And while earlier sections hinted at this symbolically, now you're starting to see it physically. The stones don't just tell the story of the stars, they mirror them. You stand up, squinting at the sky. It's almost sunrise. The light is thin and golden, pouring in sideways. And as it hits the deer stone, something incredible happens. The carvings glow, not literally, no. This isn't an ancient flashlight. But the way the light strikes the surface, it makes the deer shimmer. The etched lines catch the angle perfectly. You'd swear they were moving again, and that's when you realize this was intentional. Some deer stones were positioned to interact with the sun. During solstices. During equinoxes. During sacred times of the year we've forgotten how to mark. When the light hits just right, the carvings come alive. Not for us. Not for tourists. But for the people who built them, and for whatever they believed was watching from above. Historians still argue whether these alignments were functional, like sundials or calendars, or ceremonial. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But one thing's clear, they weren't random. You step back, mouth slightly open. The moment only lasts a few seconds. Then the sun rises past the angle, and the glow fades. The deer go still again. The light softens. You whisper something. Not a prayer. Just instinct. A thank you, maybe. Or a got it. Whether the stone hears you is anyone's guess. But you feel the air change slightly. Less heavy. Less weighting. You walk on. As the morning stretches, you find the final deer stone of the arc. It's broken. Snapped in half, its top half leaning in the grass like a fallen soldier. The deer is still there, just the hind legs, caught mid-jump. The rest is gone. You kneel beside it. This is what time does. It doesn't erase. It interrupts. And yet, the meaning lingers. Even a partial carving holds weight. The leap still matters, even if the landing was lost. You brush some grass from the surface. Somewhere far behind you, the other stones stand in silence. The line, or arc, or whatever you've just walked, it's complete, and you're beginning to feel something you didn't expect: closure. You sit with the broken stone for a long time. The grass rustles softly. A breeze weaves through the pines, then disappears again like it remembered an appointment elsewhere. There's no need to rush anymore. You've reached the final deer stone in the arc, or the line, or the celestial runway, whatever it is. Whatever it was, and now, the silence feels earned. There's a kind of reverence in ruins. The stone, despite its split, doesn't seem defeated. Just quieter. You run your hand along the fracture. The break is clean, too clean for erosion alone. Could have been a storm. A careless boot. Maybe even an earthquake. Mongolia's had a few. Or maybe it just couldn't hold its leap anymore. But even in two pieces, the message remains. This deer was leaping. Always has been. Always will be. You trace the legs again, then slowly stand behind you. The path you walked glows faintly in your memory, stone after stone, story after story. What started as a scattered arrangement of ancient rocks now feels like a sequence. Not a line, but a narrative. A deliberate passage from earth to sky, and it isn't just myth anymore. It's architecture. Cultural engineering. Ritual meets astronomy meets sculpture meets grief. And ambition. Let's not forget ambition. Because when someone 3,000 years ago says, hey, let's carve a flying deer on a 3-meter slab of stone, align it to Orion, and bury it in the middle of nowhere so future generations can feel weird and awed, that's bold. That's visionary. That's kind of hilarious, if you think about it. Here's one final quirky detail for the road. Some recent aerial surveys using drone tech have revealed invisible alignments between distant stones, lines you'd never spot on foot. It turns out the ancients may have been better at landscape-scale planning than your average modern city. Historians, yes, still arguing, are now wondering if some of these stones were part of prehistoric processional routes, sacred walks through the steppe, leading from one stone to the next. You might have just walked one. Which makes you feel weirdly accomplished. Like you've completed a pilgrimage you didn't know you were on. The wind shifts again, soft but steady. The pines sway. The clouds overhead begin to part, revealing a gentle blue. And somewhere above that, beyond the blue, beyond the sun, you imagine the stars. Faint now, hidden by day, but still up there. Watching. Waiting, and you remember what you read, what you imagined, the soul's journey upward. The deer leaping skyward. The bell to guide it, the blade to protect it, the sun disk to light the way. You can almost see it now, an invisible bridge of light, a constellation trail leading from here to wherever souls go when they stop needing feet. You're not here to solve the mystery. No one is, really. But you felt it. Walked through it. And in a way, that's enough. You give the stone one final nod, as if to say, I was here. I listened, and now, it's time to let go. You turn away from the final stone, leaving it to its rest. The ground beneath your feet softens. The grasses ripple in waves, swaying like a lullaby. The wind quiets to a whisper, brushing past your cheeks with the gentleness of memory. Behind you, the dear stones fade from view. Not because they vanish, but because you no longer need to see them. They're part of you now, etched into your own internal map. Each one a marker of a world both forgotten and somehow enduring, still humming beneath the surface of the earth and inside the stretch of sky. Your footsteps slow. There's no need to hurry anymore. The clouds drift lazily overhead, casting long, soft shadows across the land. The air is cool, but not cold. You exhale and let the breath hang there, visible for a moment before it fades. Just like all things, you remember the deer, the way they leap through stone and sky, how they never touch the ground. You think maybe that's the point. That the leap matters more than the landing. That something sacred lives in the in-dash between. So now, let your own thoughts begin to drift. Let the hum of the wind settle into the rhythm of your breath. Let the stars, hidden for now, keep watch over your dreams. And as the step quiets, and the sky deepens into blue and then into dusk, know this: you've walked a path few have traced. You've listened to ancient silence. And somewhere out there, a stone still stands, still watching, still waiting.